It was early autumn in Riverside, 2022, the town that often seemed caught in its own unhurried rhythm. Tucked along the rolling edges of low hills, Riverside wasn't the kind of place that overwhelmed anyone. It was ordinary in the best sense. Mornings filled with porch-side newspapers and barking dogs, afternoons shaped by the sound of squeaky bicycle wheels carrying children through cul-de-sacs. Life here moved with a quiet steadiness that gave even outsiders the comfort of continuity, which is why the events of my first solo property showing felt out of place, almost impossible against the backdrop of such stillness. I had recently joined a small real estate agency, nothing glamorous, just a firm where reputations rested on word of mouth. Everyone knew everyone else in our office, and my supervisor, Emily, quickly became someone I not only admired, but relied upon. She had the poise most agents spent years chasing. Unlike others who taught in bullet points or wrote instructions, Emily believed you learned best by watching. Her lessons were lived in, her voice softening to ease hesitant buyers, her poise grounding families second-guessing their choices. Everything she did seemed deliberate. For weeks, I followed closely until she decided it was time for me to step forward alone. The property she handed me was a 3-bedroom cottage on Marlowe Lane. It wasn't flashy. It had been on the market for months, waiting quietly. To me, that made it perfect, modest, manageable, unlikely to throw complications at a new agent. The client, Sandra, was described as beginning anew. Recently divorced, her children grown and settled elsewhere, she wanted something smaller yet welcoming. Emily told me she was kind but practical, not someone to be dazzled by salesmanship. She needed reassurance, not persuasion. I promised myself that I would deliver that for her. That afternoon, I parked 30 minutes before our meeting. Preparation kept my nerves steady. The street was lined with turning leaves, marigolds straining for color in a weathered garden, roses clinging stubbornly to their season. The cottage stood neat, the porch glowing faintly in angled sunlight. For a moment, I saw it the way I wanted Sandra to see it, with possibility. Then my gaze snagged on one detail. The front door was ajar. Not wide open, but enough to show a wedge of darkness inside. My chest tightened instantly. The showing notes from the last agent had made it clear the cleaners had finished the day before, locking up when they left, all keys accounted for. Yet here the door stood, unlatched. I lingered on the porch, debating whether to call Emily or the office, feeling foolish for hesitating over something so easily explained. Perhaps someone forgot. Still, unease pooled deeper the longer I stared. Finally, forcing strength into weak limbs, I stepped forward. The smell greeted me as soon as the door opened fully. Damp, slightly sour, like stagnant water caught in an unseen corner. Not unbearable, but undeniable. I flicked on the foyer light, which hummed and sputtered before settling into a reluctant glow. Silence stretched across every room. The living room appeared ordinary enough. Beige couch, second-hand coffee table, faux plant, rug. Nothing out of place at first glance, but the silence had a weight that unnerved me. I pressed forward, placing brochures neatly across the counter, fluffing pillows, arranging bottled water. Yet small irregularities revealed themselves the longer I walked. A cracked cabinet door in the kitchen, a pillow in the guest room with a faint indentation as though recently used, a towel in the master bath crumpled rather than folded, the shower curtain drawn halfway. It felt like a quiet trail of intrusion, subtle signs of someone occupying a space I'd been told was empty. Though every instinct wanted to retreat, my pride won. I told myself Emily would dismiss these details as quirks of staging. I wanted to prove myself ready. But with 10 minutes until Sandra's arrival, the quiet fractured. A creak sounded from the hallway, distinct,
weight pressing into floorboards. This wasn't the random groan of timber. This was measured, deliberate. My throat went dry. I heard my voice, unsteady yet loud enough. "Hello? Is anybody here?" No reply. Just silence folding in once more. Trembling, I forced myself through another sweep, opening closets, pulling curtains. Nothing. Nothing but unease curling tight in my chest. Sandra's knock came like salvation. Her presence grounded me, pulling me back into role. She was exactly how Emily described, kind, composed, carrying the air of someone seeking peace more than grandeur. Together we moved through the rooms. My voice eventually found its practiced rhythm. But midway down the hall, Sandra froze. Her hand clamped onto my wrist, her eyes fixed firmly past me. I turned. At the end of the corridor, a man stood in shadow, barefoot, his shirt wrinkled, his hair matted in tangled ribbons. His skin bore a pale, unhealthy hue, his eyes staring, unblinking, still, watching. Sandra's whisper was firm, almost calm. "We need to get outside." Together we inched backward, my hand groping for the door. Another creak split the silence, the man shifting his weight forward. That was all it took. We bolted, stumbling onto the porch, slamming the door behind, sprinting for safety. Inside Sandra's car, locks clicked down in unison as our breath came in sharp bursts. My fingers shook, dialing emergency services. Waiting felt unbearable. The house loomed in stillness as if mocking our panic. When the sirens finally curled down Marlowe Lane and red-blue light painted the neighborhood, I felt relief break through briefly. Officers stormed the house, flashlights sweeping. We waited for calls, confrontation, discovery. Minutes stretched cold. Finally, they returned. Nobody's inside. My throat tightened, words spilling out. "We saw someone. He was there." My desperation met calm nods, the kind practiced by those used to explaining away fear. They invited us in for their secondary sweep. Reluctantly, we followed. The house looked untouched, each room deceptively ordinary, until the hall closet swung open. Inside was evidence: a crumpled blanket on the floor, folded clothes stacked in haste, food wrappers, and an empty water bottle. A nest, carved into secrecy. The officer explained gently, "Looks like someone's been living here, a squatter. He probably slipped out the back when we arrived." He pointed toward the yard, where the gate latch hung broken. Back in the fading daylight, the cottage returned to its facade of quiet charm. To any passerby, it looked perfectly unremarkable again. But for me, its image was forever altered. That night, lying awake, the thought tormented me. He had watched me when I walked through the halls, when I fluffed pillows, when I laid out brochures. He had been there, hidden, listening. The knowledge left a weight inside me, heavier than exhaustion. From that day forward, I made a vow. Never again would I enter an unlocked property alone. Never again would I take the phrase vacant house at face value. Real estate guides might teach how to pitch ceilings, highlight lighting, or close deals, but what I learned on Marlowe Lane ran deeper. Houses may look harmless, but sometimes silence hides watchers you were never meant to meet.
Starting a new job carries an odd mixture of nerves, equal parts anticipation, unease, and a quiet fear that something will go terribly wrong before you even find your footing. I felt that exact churn one gray December morning when I walked up to the Willow Legal Group, my new place of employment. Far from the sleek glass and steel image the words law firm usually conjure, the office looked more like an abandoned cottage converted halfway into a workplace and then forgotten. The siding peeled raggedly in strips, the gutters sagged with rust, and each step leading to the entrance gave out a long, protesting creak beneath my weight. Still, money was money, and I needed it. I pushed through the front door, inhaling the slow, suffocating scent of damp paper and mildew. Dust floated in wan strips of light through half-shut blinds, catching against stacks of mismatched files, sagging chairs, and wallpaper so faded it barely remembered the days when it had once been colorful. The silence settled on me immediately. A law office should have hummed with rhythm, phones buzzing, voices weaving in and out of casework, but here was only stillness, looming and heavy. Then came the voice from down the hall. "You must be Owen." She was Margaret, the office manager, a woman in her 50s who wore her navy suit and her sense of command like armor. She didn't waste time smiling. With clipped instructions, she guided me down dim corridors, showing me the arrangement of rooms, the plain offices for absentee lawyers, her own tidy command center, and finally my workspace at the back, a desk, a weary computer, a lamp leaning precariously, and a window that overlooked a narrow alley. Nothing glamorous, but I wasn't there to decorate. I was there to survive. Margaret's explanations were delivered quickly and without invitation for questions. Answer phones, file records, fetch food when asked. Above all, take instructions and keep steady pace. I tried to convince myself it was the kind of mindless monotony I had been expecting. Hours passed slowly. Then Margaret appeared at my desk carrying an envelope. It was unmarked except for my name scrawled across the front in deliberate blue ink. She said, "Drop this in a mailbox at this address," passing me a slip of paper. There was no address written on the envelope itself, and when I asked whether I should wait for a signature, she shook her head and strode off, heels clicking without pause. The order left me confused. Couriers existed for a reason. Why leave the task to an office clerk? Still, eager not to make myself difficult on my first day, I tucked the envelope under my arm and followed the GPS out of town and into unfamiliar streets. The suburbs thinned, shops locked beneath peeling signage, lots overgrown by weeds, until eventually my phone announced I had arrived. Before me stood a hulking stone ruin at the edge of Silverbrook, a large, long-abandoned house strangled by vines, choking weeds rising over the crumbling fence line. Its windows were boarded, save for one at the highest story where dirty glass gleamed faintly. The mailbox out front leaned under years of neglect. My gut churned, hesitating. Still, I slipped the envelope inside, desperate to be done, when a sharp creak echoed overhead. My eyes snapped to the window, and behind that layer of grime, a shadow shifted. Someone or something was standing in there, watching. Frozen, I felt time thread thinly around me. The figure didn't move, didn't signal, but it was undeniably there. The air pressed against my chest. Mustered instinct broke the moment. I turned quickly, pushing my legs to stride back to the car. By the time I locked myself inside, the window was empty. Somehow, that made the dread burrow deeper. My hands shook on the steering wheel all the way back to town, every bump convincing me I had imagined nothing good. Yet when I stepped through the office doors, Margaret made no comment. She looked at me with brief acknowledgement before turning back to her work, as though nothing significant had happened. But her silence suggested more than it concealed. That restless night, I replayed the scene over and over, the creak of wood, the smudge of shadow, the oppressive feeling of being seen. My rational mind tried chalking it up to imagination, to tricks of tired nerves, but my body disagreed. My body remembered. The next morning, the routine shattered again. Margaret dropped another envelope on my desk, this one thinner, marked with no name, sealed without explanation. "Take care of it," was all she said. My stomach twisted, but I dared not defy her, not on my second day. Once again, the drive pulled me to that forsaken house. This time, the sky sagged lower, darker, like storm clouds bending to crush the earth. When I turned onto the narrow gravel path, I noticed the change instantly. The upstairs window had been nudged open.
a pale thread of curtain tossed weakly in the wind, offering glimpses of that yawning, hollow interior. I forced my feet to move quickly, stuffed the envelope into the slouching mailbox, and turned at once. Then came the groan from above, the stretch of an old hinge carrying through the air. I didn't look back. I raced to the car, slammed the doors, twisted the locks down, and fled. Back at the office, Margaret's eyes met mine with an unreadable gaze. She said nothing again, only clicked back to her computer screen like a teacher ignoring a trembling student. The silence, her silence, was worse than any reprimand. Later that evening, unease drove me to reach out to a friend who'd grown up in Silverbrook. When I mentioned the address, her pause was heavy. She whispered after a long beat, "No one lives there, Owen. There was a fire years ago. Family died. People say it's cursed or dangerous. Everyone avoids it." I went cold. The shadow at the window, that window, stood sharp in my mind now, less a squatter and more like a secret pressed into the town's order of silence. Whoever or whatever peered out of those dark panes was not supposed to be there. On my third morning, Margaret handed me another envelope. This one looked different, smaller, thinner than the rest. My name rested at the top of a folded sheet inside. Beneath, in sharp strokes of plain handwriting, were two words: "Don't pursue." I froze in place, staring at the warning, sensing movement from my periphery. Margaret was already walking away, her spine rigid, her dismissal absolute. It was a command as much as it was a warning. Something in her knew that I'd asked around, that I was curious about what I had seen. But curiosity was not allowed in Willow Legal Group. The building seemed designed to choke it down, brick by brick, silence by silence. I quit a day later. Pay, comfort, employment, all of it meant nothing against that note or those shadows lurking beyond the burnt-out windows of that house. To this day, the place still stands on Silverbrook's edge, hunched and hollow against the horizon. My friend swears nobody goes near it, yet I've driven past more than once, each time my eyes dragging against my will toward the highest window. Sometimes the curtain moves without a breeze, sometimes the glass looks darker, marked with the shape of something leaning too close. And I swear, in those fleeting moments, I feel the echo of that December morning when my name was written on an envelope, destined for nowhere, and I was sent to deliver it. I never really knew what Willow Legal Group was about, nor what business demanded secrets stationed at an abandoned ruin. Maybe it doesn't matter, but if I learned anything in those few days, it's that when your gut whispers, you listen. Not every job is worth keeping, not every task is worth completing, and not every door, even if it looks like a law office in a rundown part of the town, should be crossed. Some houses burn for a reason, some windows should always stay shut, and some jobs, once taken, cling to you like a shadow.
Back in the summer of 2022, I was looking for ways to earn a bit of extra cash and eventually decided to try out a food delivery gig. I downloaded the app, signed up, but kept putting off actually working. It wasn't until one restless evening after work, when I wasn't quite tired but bored, that I finally decided to give it a shot. At first, I took a few small orders just to get used to the process. Everything seemed straightforward, and I was feeling more confident as the night went on. Around 3 hours in, somewhere just past midnight, an order popped up on my screen that caught my attention immediately. The tip was unusually large, around $35. That was more than I had earned so far that whole night, so I didn't hesitate to accept it. The order was from our town's only late-night fast food place, a McDonald's on the edge of the highway heading out into the countryside. Once I picked up the food, I realized the delivery address was way out of town, down a road I hadn't driven before. Not long after I started driving, my phone rang. It was the customer. The guy sounded older than me, maybe in his 30s or 40s, and there was an edge to his voice. He asked me to confirm the address. I read it aloud exactly as it appeared, and after a pause, he hung up without a word. That struck me as odd. especially for someone offering such a big tip, but I shrugged and kept driving. The route took me deeper into a rural area, fields and woods on both sides, only a few houses here and there. The farther I went, the more unsettled I felt. Maybe it was the unfamiliar road, the way the fog swirled low over the grass, or the strange phone call. Whatever it was, there was a growing sense that something about this delivery wasn't quite right. When I finally pulled onto a dirt driveway, I noticed the house sitting alone amid a field of tall grass. It looked like an old farmhouse with a large porch wrapping around the front. The windows glowed softly with yellow light, and the house number matched the address I had been sent to. As I parked the car and grabbed the food bags, I noticed the quiet around me. No birds, no wind in the trees, not even the hum of a television. It was uncanny. I walked to the front door and knocked, but when I did, it creaked open by itself. I hesitated. A man's voice called out from somewhere deeper inside. "Are you the delivery driver?" It was the same man who had called me earlier. I told him I'd leave the food on the porch, but he insisted that I bring it inside, set it on the kitchen counter. His tone was sharp, impatient, like he didn't want any trouble. Stepping inside, the house smelled old and dusty, like wooden boards and years of closed windows. Just as I started to get my bearings, the man abruptly switched on a radio or speaker, playing a loud vintage piano tune. It filled the whole room, and the sudden noise made my skin crawl. I called out his name, but there was no answer. The music kept playing, drowning out everything else. I moved toward the kitchen, but as I got closer, the house grew darker. The room next to the kitchen, where I assumed he was pitch black. Suddenly, I froze. I dropped the bags and hurried back to the front entrance. That's when I saw him, standing just a few feet from the door, partially hidden in shadows. His eyes were wide open, almost glowing in the dim light. I thought I caught a glimpse of something clutched in his hands, but I quickly looked away, unwilling to see more. Heart pounding, I sprinted out of the house and jumped into my car. Racing out onto the foggy road, I didn't look back until I was safely back in town. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I'd moved any slower, the man would have locked the door behind me, trapping me inside. That night, I deleted the delivery app and never went back. Looking back, I know I made some reckless choices that evening, but I also believe I escaped something much worse. The memory of those glowing eyes and the eerie music still haunts me when I think about it.